Hello, 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 and welcome back to the first video of a little series here, a mini series, if you will. Actually, we'll see. I think it might be like 5 videos actually. So this is going to be my way too early top 30, my top 30 college football teams going into the following season, obviously. Uh, man, I'm excited. A lot of preparation. This actually took several hours. You're gonna see. Let's just get right into it. Actually, this first little page will serve as a good introduction point here. So as you can see, I kind of divided it here. As I was making the list, I kind of found out that I had a few subcategories within the top 30. So as you can see, these top six are the powerhouses, the teams that I truly think could win the national championship. But honestly, those are the only teams that I could really see winning it. Like I'd bet a large amount of money it would be one of those six teams that end up winning. Then you got the next six that are teams I expect to make the playoff or, around that time be right there in the mix for it. Then I have the very good teams who have a good shot, an outside shot, or maybe their schedule is just so hard, or one reason or another. I don't think they're going to make the playoffs, but I acknowledge they're still some of the best teams in the country. And then we got this bottom tier where I call them playoff long shots. They're good teams, good rosters maybe, but because their schedule is just so difficult, or they might be a non-power five school or just a smaller name school, I don't have them in those upper echelons. So as far as the criteria for this list, there really is none. I tried to convince myself that there was, but then I thought of like three or four different ways I could justify each selection. It just comes down to my own opinion. And I'm probably going to change that opinion in terms of why I have one team over another and stuff like that. But, so if you're coming for consistency and, concrete reasoning, this is not the place for that. But I think I am going to provide some pretty good arguments here. So I was going to do all 11 of these playoff long shots in one video, but that was going to be like 45 plus minutes, probably closer to 50, 55 minutes. So I'm going to do 30 through 25 today in this video right here. So, and I got my notepad here, my trusty notepad. It's like half script and half just like facts about each team that I did not include in these slides. So I'm excited, man. Thank you for watching, and let's get right into it. Way too early top 30. At number 30, I got Colorado. Listen, listen, listen. A good amount of you just sighed seeing Colorado in the top 30 because they weren't good last year, right? They are now in the Big 12, okay? Last season they went 4-8, okay? But this is the thing, right? I really do not understand the amount of hate Colorado gets. I think it's fair that they probably get too much attention for a team that's not very good. But here's the thing. Let's think about the primetime games they got, right? TCU, classic, amazing game. Colorado State, classic, amazing game. Stanford, classic, amazing game. USC, the comeback was amazing. Oregon, obviously, they got blown out the building. Nebraska, that probably maybe shouldn't have been a primetime game. I think it was still a good game, but it's like I don't understand the hate Dion and like specifically gets for bringing this obscure random program into the spotlight and providing just entertainment, right? That's what I care about most is entertainment in college football. Like maybe it is a bit of a circus and all that stuff, but the hate that they get is so unwarranted in my opinion. And he took quite literally the worst team. Colorado 2 years ago was the worst Power Five team, bar none. They were literally at the bottom, like by a long shot. He took them to 4-8, a fuck ton of money, a fuck ton of attention, and a lot of good, entertaining games. And they were ranked 18 at one point. Who would have thought the very worst Power Five team would be ranked at 18, like 3 games into the following season? That in itself is incredible. But they did collapse. They did collapse at the end of last season, and they played some very bad football in there. But I think at the end of next season, they could be 8-5 or maybe even 9-4. We're gonna get into that. So let's hop straight into it, man. Here's the team stats. Here's what they did last season, and I'm not gonna, try and sugarcoat it. They were not a good team last season. They were and the worst run game in the country. That number right there, 68.9, that was about 10 yards per game worse than second place. I don't even remember who second place was, but they ran for like close to 80 yards per game. So Colorado was far and away the worst run game in the country. And that sacks allowed per game, that 129th, that was like second to last. Okay. So those two numbers right there kind of point to the same fact that their offensive line was complete garbage. Okay. But here's the interesting thing. With all that being said, with no run game and a horrible O line, they were still a good passing attack, right? 16th in passing yards per game. That's impressive. When a team knows you can't run and your offensive line sucks, to pass for nearly 300 yards a game is beyond impressive, in my opinion. And also points per game, that's above average. That's slightly above average. That is also very impressive to me. And also the turnovers. You would think, right? A team that has to throw the ball with a bad line would be near the top in turnovers. They were close to the bottom. That's because I think Shedeur does such a good job of protecting the football. So the couple stats here really stick out offensively for how bad their offensive line is. They should not be as good as they are in certain categories. Uh, and defensively, it's kind of surprising to me that they were above average in terms of sacks, like defensively. Like you can see 53rd there at 2.25 a game. But also in the upper echelon in terms of takeaways, 20 takeaways. That's impressive to me. Like for a team that's not good on paper, a defense that is not good on paper, their secondary was supposed to be good. It was solid, I'd say. But obviously yards per game, awful. Like they couldn't stop the run. They couldn't generate It felt like they couldn't generate any pressure at times. So it really shocked me they got that many sacks per game. Points per game, also obviously not good at all. So it started on the offensive and defensive line. Obviously, arguably the worst offensive line in the country, and defensively not being able to stop the run, not being able to get physical. But they did get a few takeaways, which was surprising. So I think the defense should get better with experience because year one to year two, there needs to be a massive improvement there. But I also think Colorado next season will be a dominant passing offense, right? Because if you just look at some marginal improvements, let's just say it's a brand new offensive line, by the way. If they're just slightly better, then they should be rushing for a lot more yards per game, right? And also, it should just give Shedeur that much more time to get the ball out quicker. Like they were having to throw the ball within like a second, 2 second at times. If he gets more time in the pocket, he's going to do what he did against TCU and against Nebraska and against Colorado State and teams like that, against USC at times. Moving on to their schedule, last season and next season. So as you can see right there, right, they played 8 teams last season. Okay, 8 teams who were ranked at one point. That might be the most in the country. I'm not going to say that for a fact, but their schedule last year was brutal, absolutely brutal. And they still managed to squeak out 4 wins. 5 of those 8 losses, by the way, were one possession games. So 5 out of 8 were one possession losses. And 7 of those 8 losses were to ranked teams. So it's like when you really dig into it, their ceiling was really about 5 or 6 games. Okay. They won 4. Um, the season, like I said earlier, it went off the rails when they blew that game to Stanford. It was 29-0, I believe. That was a horrible loss, an absolutely atrocious, gut-wrenching loss, and they never recovered from that. If they did, though, if they just won that Stanford game, I feel like people's outlook on them would be entirely different because those last 5 teams they lost to, UCLA, Oregon State, Arizona, Washington State, and Utah, were all ranked in the top 20 at some point. Colorado, on paper, was not beating any of those teams. So if they just would have beat Stanford and they started the season out 5-2, I feel like people would have looked at that so differently. But I understand that Stanford loss was absolutely atrocious. But here's the thing about next season. They only play 5 teams next season that are in my top 30. That bodes well for them. And in my opinion, if you look at their schedule right here on the right, every one of these games is winnable, right? The last 4 games are brutal. I'm not going to deny that. Texas Tech, Utah, Kansas, and Oklahoma State. All those teams, honestly, would be in like my top 40, my top 35 even. But look at their first 8 games. First of all, North Dakota State, Nebraska, Colorado State, Baylor. They should be 4-0 in that stretch. But if you include UCF, I definitely think they should start the season 4-1. No, sorry, Nebraska UCF will not be easy. I think they're going to handle Colorado State this year compared to last season. North Dakota State should be much easier than TCU was as the first game last season. And also Baylor, I'd say pretty easy. So their first 5 games, I expect them to be 4-1. And if they are 4-1, I would probably have them ranked in my top 25. And I think most people would as well, because that's simply a good start. Then it gets tough. Kansas State, Arizona back to back. That's a tough back to back. You get Kansas State at home, but you have to go to Arizona. Here's the thing. Look at how they played Arizona last year. They played Arizona really damn close. They should have won that game, if not for a few mistakes they made in the fourth quarter. So I think they could pull one of those off. Okay. Then you get Cincinnati as kind of a breather before that last 4. You get Utah, who they played close without Cam Rising, of course. You get Utah, Oklahoma State at home. You got to go to Texas Tech and Kansas. So it's tough, man. I think that first 8 games, though, I think they should win 5. I think they could win 6. Let's just say they're 5-3 in their first 8. Can they snatch 2 away from that last 4? I think they could. First of all, they're going to have some amazing games like UCF, Arizona, Kansas, Texas Tech. Those should all just be great games to watch. They're going to have, like, Colorado still is going to be one of my favorite teams just to watch because the games are so crazy. But yeah, man, I expect them to be a solid team. Like, let's get into it right now. Let's get into the roster here. Let me flip the page as well. Where do I start? Obviously, the thing with Colorado was 15 new starters, right? Last year was fucking 22 or 21 new starters. Um, the wide receiver core was the strength of the team last season. I think it's going to be better. Not only will it be better because you got guys like Travis Hunter, Jimmy Horn, Omarion Miller just getting another year of experience. You bring in Will Sheppard from Vanderbilt to replace Xavier Weaver. Xavier Weaver was a really good player from last season. He went off to the NFL. Now you got Will Sheppard. I think the wide receiver core is going to be better. Obviously, when a Travis or Hunt or healthy Travis Hunter out there, damn near every play. Jimmy Horn in the slot is a really good, really explosive slot receiver. I love the plays he's able to make down the field. And I think Will Sheppard, honestly, at least production wise, will give you more than Xavier Weaver did last season. So honestly, the receiving core, it's up there. It's really one of the best in the country. People won't talk about that, but Travis Hunter, Will Sheppard, Jimmy Horn, if any other team had that receiver core, and Marion Miller as a wide receiver 4, people would be like, "Oh my God, what a group! What a group of guys!" Even Lejante Web or Wester down there, the transfer, like they have a really good wide receiver core. Obviously, Shadur. Here's the thing about Shadur. He's not a likable guy. I get that. The father's son, the coach's son, I should say, being the quarterback. I get that. But here's the thing, man. Everybody should have him as a top 10 quarterback. And, if you would have told people last year that Jaden Daniels would have won the Heisman, a couple people did predict it, but he wasn't everybody's top 10 list. But he was like 5, 6, 7, 4, 8. Like nobody had Jaden Daniels as a top 3 quarterback. I don't think hardly anybody would have Shadur as a top 3 quarterback, but I could absolutely see the guy putting together a monster season. And, by the end of the year, we're talking about he's the best quarterback in college football. So I think he's also overhated and underrated, in my opinion. Dallin Hayden, transfer from Ohio State, I believe, should just instantly be an upgrade over whatever they had last season. I think his name was Dylan Edwards or something like that. Dallin Hayden, instant upgrade. And you see 5 new starters on that offensive line, right? It needed to happen. You got a couple guys there that are still, backups and stuff, but their offensive line sucked last season. I don't care who you bring in, they're upgrades. It just point blank. Here's the thing, though. When you got this many new offensive linemen, they're going to struggle, right? The cohesion is not going to be there, especially early in the year. But I do think that as the season goes on, it's just going to be massive improvements. The second half of Colorado's season last year was just abysmal. The second half next season, I think we're just going to see a completely different group of guys. So I'm excited for that. And you got 6 defensive starters returning. I like that. I think defense, obviously, you need a lot more cohesion than offense. I think you just kind of throw some guys in there. But 6 defensive starters return. You got 5 new guys, and you just need some marginal improvements. In the Big 12, there's going to be a lot of shootouts, and I expect them to be able to win several of those shootouts. But defensively, if they can just get a similar amount of takeaways, if they can get 20 takeaways back to back years, and I just think they're such an explosive team. And of all those games I showed you, I don't think you can just pencil in any of them as a loss. So their success, in my opinion, depends on their offensive line and how good it is. How much time can they give Shadur? How much improvement we'll see in their run game, and then defensively just force enough takeaways. They're not going to be, top 10, top 20, top 30 in terms of run defense, pass defense, scoring defense, sacks, anything like that. But if they can just bend, don't break, I think Colorado can easily win 8 to 9 games. So yeah, man, they're my top 30. I couldn't just not include them. Next up, we got Tulane at 29 for me. They are in the AAC still. So last season they went 10-3. They are 23-5 over the last 2 years. Okay. Head coach Willie Fritz did an amazing job, but he did leave. So now they got John Summerall. I am not a long-term college football fan. I don't know who that is, but I recognize the last name. And apparently he's from Troy. He came from Troy. He was the head coach there. And Troy, another G5 team who's been really, really good the last 2 years. So I like that hire a lot, actually. And they also lost their quarterback, Michael Pratt, to the NFL. So a lot of change happening with Tulane. But I think it's more nuanced than that. And I think there's a reason I still have them in my top 30. We'll get to that here. So they were ranked at 17 at one point last season. Obviously, 2 years ago, they were coming off a monumental high. They beat USC in their bowl game, the People's Champions, all that stuff. And I think they're actually going to be even better next season than they were last year. Let's get into it. Statistically here, this kind of shocked me. Michael Pratt dealt with a few injuries last season, so there was some, back and forth at quarterback, but they were not good offensively. Like, this shocked me when I found out they were not top 50 in anything, any of these categories. They turned it over too much. They gave up a middle of the pack amount of sacks, rushing, passing, not good, scoring, middle of the pack. Like, they were just a basic offense. It's shocking to me that they were able to win so many games, but it comes from their defense. And here's the deal. They were top 25 in 4 categories defensively. That shocked me. 27 takeaways. That's remarkable. 27, top 4 in the country. And they've definitely been overachieving the last 2 years, because for a team that was that literally mid offensively, like, it's impressive they've been winning so many games. And there's so much room for improvement. Like, I was under the assumption, right? Well, you lose your quarterback, it's going to be tough to remain as good of an offensive team, but they weren't a good offensive team. So it's like them losing their quarterback. Yeah, it's not going to help. It's not going to be easy, but it's like, well, it's not like we're a high powered offense to begin with. So I think, you know, there's just a lot of room for improvement. I think to win 10 games and not be good offensively is really impressive to me. Moving on to their schedule here. Flip the page. Starting at last season, right? The Ole Miss loss was the only game they lost in their first fucking, what is that? Their first 12 games. It was the only one they lost. And that was to what ended up being a top 10 team in the country without Michael Pratt. They didn't have their quarterback that game. And they only lost by 17. That's a pretty understandable loss. Then after that, of course, they went on a 10-game win streak with wins over Memphis, who will be on this list, and UTSA, who was a very good AAC team. They ended up losing the AAC championship to SMU, who was the better team last season, also on this list. And their bowl game was after Willie Fritz left. So it's like, that's understandable to me. Like, it's like if you're one of those teams like Oregon State, for example, who your coach leaves and you're expected to go play this bowl game, it's like, I don't know. I really don't like that about college football. I wish the coaches, like, that whole stuff was handled after the season. Because some of these bowl games, it's really hard to justify them if a team's playing without their fucking coach and most of their roster is also leaving the transfer portal. So it's like, I don't like that. But it does count as a loss on the record. And here's the thing. So next season, they play 3 teams in my top 30. Obviously, AAC schedule. That's not too bad. And I do expect them to rattle off another long win streak in the middle of the season, like they did last year. Kansas State and Memphis, in my opinion, are the 2 biggest games here, because Oklahoma, you're probably penciling that in as a loss. I don't think anybody would expect them to beat Oklahoma. But here's the thing. If you lose to Kansas State, right, and then of course you lose to Oklahoma on the road too, by the way, then you're starting the season off 1-2. A lot of people would just write them off at that point, and then I think it would work for them. They fly under the radar, rattle off an 8-game win streak. But if you could beat Kansas State, right, and it would just be the exact same thing as what happened last year. You lose one of your first 3 games, rattle off a big win streak, you're in position to win the AAC championship game. And I think that Memphis game is going to be a back-to-back. I think Tulane and Memphis are going to play in the AAC championship game. So it just comes down to, do you split the series with Memphis? Do you win both? Do you lose both? That's what really is going to determine Tulane's season here. So I could easily see 10 wins here. All they have to do is split either Kansas or Memphis, and also obviously take care of business against all the other teams. But if we're being honest with each other, those teams are not good. They should beat all those teams. And even a playoff appearance. If they beat Memphis both times, like, they wouldn't even need to beat Kansas State, Oklahoma. If they beat Memphis both times, that's a 9-game win streak, conference champions, and because of the way the new playoff shit works, top 5 highest champions, which is stupid, by the way. It should be the top 4, but top 5 highest ranked conference champions. Tulane could easily be a playoff team. So I don't think many people take that into consideration. Tulane has the possibility to be really, really special next season, especially if they can steal one versus Kansas State, Oklahoma, probably Kansas State, and split with Memphis. Here's the roster. Here's what the roster is looking like. So obviously, Michael Pratt gone. But here's the thing. He was not some amazing quarterback, right? His production is not going to be hard to replace. And you got Ty Thompson, who was the guy from Oregon, waited his chance for a long time, never got it because they brought in Bo Nix, then they brought in Dylan Gabriel. So he left. He went to Tulane. So I really don't know much about him, but honestly, the bar is Michael Pratt. And, respectfully, that's not a very high bar. I think he can use his legs to replicate what Michael Pratt did in that category. And look, this is Makai Hughes' offense. If you didn't know, Makai Hughes, true freshman, had nearly 1,500 yards from scrimmage last season. It was amazing. As the season went on, he just kept getting better and better. So I expect him next season. I guess he was a redshirt freshman, actually. So not a true freshman, but still, nonetheless, amazing season last year. So I expect him to just be the engine to this offense, and they'll go as far as he can carry them, literally. He needs to get close to 350 touches next season if they want to have a shot at being a good team. They did lose their top 3 wide receivers, 2 to the NFL, 1 to Tennessee, I believe. So Mario Williams, the transfer from USC, how ironic is that, is going to end up being their guy here. Shaz Preston came in from Alabama. Mario Williams, though, he's the guy, right? Ty Thompson, Mario Williams, they're going to need to build that chemistry early. And Mario Williams could end up being better than anybody they had last season. So that is interesting to me. So Mario Williams, Ty Thompson, and obviously Makai Hughes are the key players here for this offense. And defensively here, their front 7 is still relatively the same. Well, absolutely it's the exact same, right? If you look at that, well, top 6, I guess you could say. And it is a new secondary. Head coach from Troy, he is a defensive guy. So you take a team that was already pretty good defensively, add in, this new head coach. I expect them to be a pretty similar team in terms of statistics. I expect the offense to get slightly better, but I also expect the defense to be slightly better. So I don't really fear any sort of decline or fall off from Tulane just because their coach left and their quarterback left. Usually when that happens, the alarms sound and people just completely forget about teams that lose both of those in one offseason. But in Tulane's case, it could be an upgrade. So it should be a run first defensive team, right? Who can work and easily schedule it, because it is a fairly easy schedule, honestly, to a third straight double digit win season. I think that is a very fair expectations for Tulane next season. And I do expect them to finish in my top 25, maybe even in my top 20. Moving on, Texas A&M. I'll be honest, man. This is a tough one because it's so tough to really put any faith in Texas A&M. But that was the Jimbo era. It's a new era now. They got in Mike Elko from Duke, and maybe he's the guy who can finally make use of a talented A&M roster. Because every year, what do people say? A&M's not missing the talent. They're not missing the location. They're not missing the environment. They're not missing the resources. They're just missing the right coach. Maybe they have the right coach. We have not seen a single game yet, so who knows? Last season, 7-6. They got ranked as highly as 23rd, like the first 2, 3 weeks of the season. Next season, I predict 9 wins, 9-4, and let's take a look at the stats from last season. So here's the thing: they looked very different with and without Connor Wegman, their starting quarterback. He got hurt early on in the season. Somehow, with that being said, they were still top 25 in scoring. That's impressive to me. Max Johnson was the guy. Once Wigman went down, and he wasn't very good, but I mean, they still found a way to put points on the board. Offensive line, I feel like is the issue here because if you look at sacks allowed, bottom of the pack, and also rushing yards. I feel like A&M should just be a better running team. To be 90th, that's not a good look. So bottom of the pack in terms of rushing yards and sacks allowed. Passing yards somehow top 30. Obviously, I talked about the points per game. Turnovers still. They limited turnovers somehow. So the offense, it was better statistically than I would have expected. And top or defensively, top 40 in everything besides takeaways. And oh, sorry, their front seven was the strength of this defense last season. You look at stuffing the run, they were top 13 in the country, total yards, top 20, sacks, seventh in the country last season, 3.23 a game. So, like I said, their front seven was the strength of this team. Takeaways did not get that many. And they actually went from first in the country 2 years ago in passing yards allowed down to 37. So that's a bit of a decline there. But defensively, this team was still pretty stout. I'd say they did their job. But offensively, obviously, without your starting quarterback, it became very difficult to win games. Let's take a look at their schedule, how last season went. Here's the thing, though: all six of their losses were to teams that were in the top 20 at some point. So it's tough to, if we're thinking about this, every team they lost to was better than them. That's not an excuse, but I'm just saying, like, they beat every other team by double digits. So I think there was clearly just a line of separation there. Look at all the other teams they beat everybody by double digits, including four SEC teams. So they're not a bottom of the pack team. They're a they're a solid team that just did not pull off any upsets. You could argue they should have won Miami game. You should have been able to beat either Ole Miss or Tennessee. Probably should have been able to beat Oklahoma State, but that was, I think Jimbo was gone by that point. But look how close these games were. Like Alabama, one score. Tennessee, one score. Ole Miss, one score. LSU, their defense just didn't show up that game, but that was a Jaden Daniels masterclass, if I'm not mistaken. Um, and here's the thing about next season: they play four teams in the top 30. So a big, should be a lot easier, I think, at least on paper, than last game or than last season. Sorry. Um, Here's the thing though: three of those four teams are in my top 10. So you can pencil in if you want just a couple losses here, like Notre Dame and Texas, their first and last game of the season. It's going to be tough to win those, honestly. So I'm looking at the middle of their schedule here for the wins. Those middle 10 games are what I'm looking at. Um, Here's the thing, though. Their four toughest games, they're all at home. Notre Dame at home, Texas at home. And here's the two I have a little more faith in. Missouri at home, I don't really think they can win that one. But LSU at home, I think they could take that game, honestly. And they should win, in my opinion, 8 out of those middle 10 games. Because last season they were able to take care of business. If they do that this season, they could possibly beat every team besides LSU and Missouri. And if they could steal one of those games, then you walk away from the regular season 9-3. That would be a pretty good year for A&M, especially in Mike Elko's first season. So let's take a look at the roster now. It looks the same, but they did have a few changes there. So they did lose their two best receivers, Evan Stewart and Aeneas Smith. Or is it Aeneas Smith or Aeneas? I think it was Aeneas Smith. Lost him to the NFL, lost Evan Stewart, sorry, to Oregon. But they still should be okay. You got Noah Thomas, Moose Muhammad, Jade Walker. I don't think they're going to be bad in terms of their receiving core. They should still be solid. Um, their quarterback is back, Connor Wigman, their best quarterback from last season. Hopefully, he's ready to be healthy. He's the main goal here, and just play at a level that's better than what they've had for a long, long time. And their two best running backs also come back. Le'Veon Moss, Amari Daniels both averaged over 5 yards per carry, if I'm not mistaken. So you bring back both of those guys, run game. Hello, hello, hello. Sorry. You knew the mic was going to die. Mic dies every video. All right. Bring back your two best running backs. And defensively, they should still be pretty dependable. Like I don't look at this defense. You're bringing two or four new starters, sorry, via the transfer portal, but you lost guys like Edgerrin Cooper, the linebacker, to the NFL. But you lost also guys like Walter Nolan. So defense might take a slight step back. But in my eyes, I think a healthy Connor Wegman makes this offense much more explosive and an easier schedule. Like I expect an increase in wins, right? Even though it's a new head coach and everything, I expect A&M to improve as far as the record goes. So we need significant improvements, like I said, on the offense in order to pull off an upset over one of those big four teams. I just need one. LSU, Missouri, Texas, Notre Dame, all at home. Just beat one of those teams for me. And you could potentially, if they do that, win 10 games. A 10-win season at A&M for the first time since 2012, that would make Mike Elko a legend if he could pull off 10 wins year one at A&M. That would be incredible. But again, a very tall task there. Next up, we got Kansas State. Kansas State was ranked 15 at one point last season. They started out last season at 15 for me. Ended up with 9 wins, and I think they're going to improve. I think they're going to be 10-3 next season, but only at 27 for me. Why is that? Well, their biggest strength is their consistency. Chris Klieman has won at least 8 games in every season besides the COVID year, and they've been a consistent top 20 team over the last 2 years. So let's get right into it. It seems like I only have positives to say. Why do I have them all the way down here at 27? Well, here's what they did last season. Offensively, you could say that they ran the ball extremely well, okay, which also helped them limit the turnovers, okay. 200 plus rushing yards per game. If you break that category, you're in the top tier. Also, only 12 turnovers. Love to see that. Protecting the football is so important. They had a complimentary passing game with Will Howard at the helm, but still managed to produce an explosive offense, top 10 in the country in terms of points per game. Defensively, they were middle of the pack. They didn't really excel in many areas, but they rarely lost a game because of their defense. So it's basically what you want. If you're an explosive Big 12 team that scores a lot of points, all you can ask of your defense is to keep you in the game. And they're top 30 in takeaways and points per loud, which if you think about it, if I had to pick two stats out of this category that I would want, my team to be the best at, it would be points per game and takeaways. So you can't really knock that. Here's the schedule here. So what happened last season, okay? All 4 of their losses were by 1 score. Okay? All 4 of their losses were to good teams. 2 of their losses, Missouri and Texas, were to great teams, and those were both only by 3 points. So I think they took care of business in dominant fashion, by the way. They dominated their Big 12 competition. Just look at these games, right? They beat Southeast Missouri State, obviously. What should you do against Southeast Missouri State? Beat them 45-0. Troy, a double-digit win team, 42-13. TCU 41-3, Houston 41-0. They beat back-to-back Big 12 teams 82-3. Beat the brakes off Baylor. Like beat NC State by multiple scores. UCF blew them out. Like this was a really good team. They just could not win their biggest games. Sorry about that. Where was I? They simply could not win their biggest games. And when you look at next season, they play 5 teams in my top 30. So that's where I think, it concerns me a little bit because clearly this is a team that struggled to win against the best of the best. And like you look at next season, Arizona, Oklahoma State, Kansas, Colorado, Tulane, all these games where I'm not necessarily just going to pencil those in as wins. You know what I mean? So, but here's the thing: they don't play anybody in my top 10. So while I don't think it's going to be easy for them to pull those wins off, I do think it's possible. They can, on paper at least, win every game they play. Looking at the roster, and this is the real thing holding me back. Okay, they lost their quarterback, Will Howard, right? But some people say the backup, Avery Johnson, is better than Will Rogers or Will Howard. So that's yet to be seen. That is just a theory at this moment. But they should still have a dominant run game because of DJ Giddens. DJ Giddens, very slept on, but one of the best running backs in the country. He had over 1,500 yards from scrimmage last season. He needs to get at least 325 touches next season. He needs to be the focal point of their entire offense. But with that comes a bit of a dependence that is always scary to have on a running back, because if DJ Giddens doesn't have a great game, or God forbid he gets hurt, Kansas State's offense is going to be in trouble because they lost their two best receiving options to the NFL. And what's left, at least on paper, I do not love. Okay. So the passing game in general is a big question for me. And their entire offense, like I said, is going to ride on DJ Giddens entirely. Defensively, they did not make a single addition in the transfer portal, you know, and I don't really know how to feel about that. They're kind of banking on chemistry over talent in a way. So I could see the benefits, but also if they're not just a good enough unit, then they're going to be in trouble. So overall, Kansas State is consistent, they're reliable, they have a proven culture, and they should be one of the biggest threats in the Big 12. With all that being said, I do not think they're going to be as good as they were last year, at least early on. As the season goes on, we could see them really find their groove and potentially even win the Big 12. And if they win the Big 12, they're in the playoff. Like it's undeniable. So we're gonna see. Kansas State, I don't know how to feel about them. I could really see it going either way. I could see them being a 7-8 win team, or I could see them winning 9, 10, 11 games, you know? So it's tough, man. It really all depends on how good Avery Johnson is. Moving on though, turning the page, we have SMU at number 26. And SMU was such a tough team for me because they were great last season. They got as high as number 17. And I expect them to be better than they were last season. Like it's it's going to be interesting because they're moved from the AAC to the ACC. Cal and SMU both got gobbled up by the ACC. And when I look at their team and their schedule, I kind of raise my eyebrow a little bit. Like, wait a minute, could they be the dark horse, pun on pun, or quote on? Oh, fuck, I fucked that up. The dark horse, because SMU, it's a fucking horse right here of their division or conference. No, fuck, let's move on. Here's the stats for last season. And here's the thing, man. Look how good they were across the board. This was shocking to me. Like everything. They were top 40 in every stat, offensively and defensively, besides takeaways, which is a lot has to do with luck in terms of takeaways. But they were one of the best teams in the country statistically. We're going to get to teams in my top 10, in my top 6 or 7 that don't look this good, at least, statistically. So they were a top 10 offense in the country, maybe top 12 easily. Okay. And they didn't have any weaknesses. They ran the ball incredibly well, top 40. They threw the ball even better, 22nd in the country, top 10 in points per game. They didn't give up many sacks, only 1.14 a game. They didn't turn it over much. Like everything was a go offensively. And defensively, they got the third most sacks in the country. Like that's so weird to me. Like SMU, really, third most sacks in the country. And by the way, they had 6 players with over 4 sacks. And again, defensively, top 30 and everything except for takeaways. So this was just a complete team that really didn't have any weaknesses, and it resulted in an 11-win season, which nobody talks about, by the way. Like SMU got no attention. So here's how they did it here. They lost. They started out 2-2, and when they did that, they kind of were off my radar, to be honest with you. But similar to Tulane, they just rattled off a massive win streak, 9 straight games. Okay. But here's the thing that really, really scares me about SMU. They were 0 for 3, okay, against Power Five schools. Okay. And look, they won their most games in the season since 1982, but they did it all against group of five teams or just D2 teams like fucking Prairie View and shit like that. But 0-3 versus Power Five schools very or scares me very much because TCU was not a good team and they got dominated. Boston College, not a good team. They lost by multiple possessions. So it's not like they were having close losses, right? Like they were losing convincingly against every Power Five team they played, but they dominated their AAC schedule. Um, so how am I supposed to, when I see 0-3 versus Power Five schools, but they dominate everybody else, how am I supposed to project how they're going to do next season with the ACC schedule? And this is the thing, it's an easy ACC schedule. They only play 2 teams in my top 30, just 2 of them. Okay. But look, they have a chance to avenge their losses, by the way, to TCU and Boston College. And they could go 6-0 in their last 6. Stanford, Duke, Pitt, Boston College at home, Virginia, and Cal. That's easy. That is so light. If a team like Florida State or Louisville or Miami had that final 6, would be like, oh, easy 6-0, pencil it in. But it's SMU. I just don't know. But if they did go 6-0 down that stretch, how are they not making the ACC championship game? They play Florida State in Louisville back to back. Can you pull one of those off? Can you do it, SMU? I don't know. I just don't know. Because their first 4 games are also, I'd say, pretty easy. You get 4 straight games at home, with Florida State being the precipice of that. Their schedule is so easy, man. And that's what I'm banking on. They were 0-3 last year against Power Five. But if they're able to translate it, man, they could be a 10-win team, a Power Five 10-win team. So it's so tough, but I love their chances because the schedule is just light work. Here's the roster we're looking at. They're returning nearly every starter on offense. Okay, I love that. Chemistry and experience are going to be their edge in damn near every single game they play. And in terms of their receiving threats, they have 6 to 7 guys that I can confidently say that they could spread the ball to. I love their tight end. And as far as the receivers, all 6 of those receivers you see there had like over 200 yards last season. And they bring them all back. They lost nobody to the NFL, including both their running backs, Jalen Knighton and LJ Johnson. Both ran for over 5 yards per carry. So, like I said earlier with the stats, they can do everything. They can do whatever they want offensively. And Preston Stone is a damn good quarterback. He could possibly, by the end of the season next year, statistically, be the best quarterback in the ACC, which not a lot of people are, would argue that now. Defensive front 7 is mainly intact. Elijah Roberts, who had nearly 10 sacks last season, he returns, and they should still be a top end unit. I don't know how they're going to hold up. Like I said, the biggest thing here is the transition from G5 to Power 5. How good are they? It's tough to say. But what I would say about them overall, a team which dominated at the G5 level and has yet to prove what they can handle the top end competition. But on paper, they should be one of the best teams in the ACC, or they could crash and burn and win 6 to 7 games. It's no in between. They're either going to be one of the best or just a middle of the pack team. So I don't know, man. I don't know what the answer is, but I love SMU on paper. Moving on to a team I also love on paper, but plays in a much easier conference. And this is the thing, right? Do I think SMU would beat Memphis? Yes. But do I think Memphis is going to have a much easier path to the college football playoff, for example, because of their schedule? Yes, I do think so. They were not ranked at all last season, was Memphis. But head coach Ryan Silverfield is 3-0 in bowl games at Memphis, and he is returning possibly his best roster to date. And they have the chance to pull off their first back-to-back 10-win season since or just ever in school history. Have never won 10 seasons, or sorry, they've never won 10 games in back-to-back years. They have a chance to do that for the first time ever. Let's get into the stats here. And I think they're going to win 12 games. I'll explain to you how later. They are an amazing offense. Okay. head or quarterback Seth Hennigan and star running back Blake Watson stole the show last year. Blake Watson was an amazing receiver out of the backfield and also receiving out of the backfield, that is, and also running with the football. They were top 10 in the country in both passing yards and points scored. Okay, they were an explosive offense. And they were top 30, they were top 33 in everything except for rushing yards, but they also had a star running back. So it's like, that doesn't really apply. When they needed Blake Watson to show up, he did in fact show up. Defensively, though, the Tigers defense didn't do them any favors here. They were constantly in shootouts, which they managed to win, by the way. But they were in the bottom half defensively in nearly every category here, except for takeaways, which, like I say, if you can be in that top level in terms of takeaways, that's how USC won double-digit games a couple years ago. They sucked in everything defensively, but they were in the top tier in terms of takeaways. Let's look at their schedule here. All three of their losses came against ranked teams. And not just that, ranked teams who won at least 10 games, and all those losses were by 10 points or less. So honestly, it's like I'm not going to blame you for losing to Missouri by one score. I'm not going to blame you, for losing to Tulane. I'm not going to blame you for losing a 4-point game to your conference champions, in a shootout. But next season, or actually, let's stay on last season, actually, they had 6 games where they scored over 40 points. But look at this 4-game stretch right here. North Texas, they gave up 42. They won somehow. USF, they gave up 50 and won somehow. Charlotte, they gave up 38. And SMU, they gave up 38. So they gave up 38 or more in 4 straight games and went 3-1. That is ridiculous. Um, but they have proven that they can certainly win a shootout next season. They only play 2 teams in my top 30. That would be Florida State and Tulane. Their final 10 games, at least in my opinion, their final 10 games should all be wins. And I say 10 because the AAC championship game is probably going to be against Tulane. So starting from Navy down to Tulane and then Tulane again, in my opinion, they could and should go 10-0. And Memphis, if they do that, if they win their last 10, let's say they lose to Florida State, but they beat North Alabama and Troy, they're going to be 12-1, and they're almost certainly going to be the highest rated G5 team, and they're going to make the college football playoff, which I would love to see because they're going to have an explosive offense. And even a 13-0 season, you cannot tell me that Florida State, look how close they played Missouri. Look how close. Florida State next season is not going to be as good as Missouri was last season. I can say that with confidence. So you cannot tell me they have no shot against Florida State. I think they do. So Memphis has a case as the best offense in the entire group of 5, and they have a fairly easy path to the college football playoff. Like, man, let's get into the roster first. So Seth Hennigan, I think you could make the case that he is a top 10 quarterback in the country because he's played 3 years. All 3 of those years, he's thrown for over 3,200 yards, a pretty good touchdown and interception ratio. Like, he's very experienced. And his 2 favorite wide receivers, which, by the way, combined for nearly 2,000 yards last season, they're both back. Rock Taylor and Demir Blankenship, what a name he has, by the way, both returning. Lost Blake Watson, obviously, to the NFL, but Mario Anderson, former South Carolina running back, he steps in the door. I do not expect him to match Blake Watson's 1,600 plus yards and 17 touchdowns. However, he should have a breakout year of his own. I think he's going to be just fine. I expect well over 1,200 yards from scrimmage, maybe 10, 11 touchdowns, something like that. So you're still going to have really good production out of the backfield, in my opinion. Defensively, I like the fact that they bring in 4 new starters via the transfer portal, and it just can't get much worse. They proved last season that they don't need good defense to win double-digit games. But if they had solid defense, it'd be nice. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I don't want their defense to improve. I hope it does. But quite frankly, they could take it or leave it. They don't need it because their offense is so talented. So like I said, man, all it takes is a couple slight improvements to their defense. And if that happens, I'm not sure they lose a game. outside of FSU, which I am going to pay such close attention to, because Florida State plays so many of these teams on this list so far. Like they play Tulane, I think, SMU, Memphis. Like they play so many. They play a big role in a lot of these team seasons. So if they lose one or two of those games, man, it would be massive for these teams down here. So Memphis, I got my eyes on them. They're in my top 25. I got my eyes on them. They're a sleeper, but they could easily make the college football playoff just because of how good their offense is. So that's going to be it for this video, man. There you go. There's those bottom six revealed. Man, I'm excited, man. I enjoyed this video. Like it took a while to make, but I enjoyed putting it together. So yeah, man. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Uh This is probably going to take a while, to be honest. Like, it's going to take a while to finish putting all these videos together. Like, this is 1 out of 5 so far. I'm working on the second one. I'm going to have a video coming out in between, like another draft related video. Um, and I don't know, man. I'm taking a risk here because I haven't done a college football video in a while. It's been like damn near a month, I think, or maybe even over a month. And I got a lot of new subscribers from the draft, so I'm hoping a couple of y'all are college football fans and y'all are gonna enjoy this form of content. You know, it's the middle of the off season, no football or no NFL, no college football, but I'm still trying to find ways, man. Trying to pump out 2 or 3 videos a week. So leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new. I will see you very, very soon, and thank you for watching. Peace.